Well, greetings, imagination connoisseurs. Once again, it is I, your Duke of Dope Discourse, your master of fun and wonder, your viceroy of verisimilitude, your sommelier of sci-fi or cinema, your archbishop of Banterbury, your chancellor of cheerfulness, and of course, your pharaoh of physical media, and finally, as we all know, your existential Mr. Rogers, Robert Meyer Burnett, coming at you. That's right, Robcasting at you imagination connoisseurs, you members of this, the Post-Geek Singularity community. Did you all hang out at DC Fandom this morning? Did you enjoy it? I caught a little bit of it, but I'm had to build a shelf, dealing with physical media still. Elizabeth's starting a new term at Art Center, so, got to get out of her. The last vestiges of whatever I own has to be moved out of the house so she has her workspace all ready to go, which is exciting. Ladies and gentlemen, you know what? Kind souls, gentle beings, you imagination connoisseurs, wherever you hail from across these 28 known galaxies, and however you identify, it's always okay to admit when you're wrong. And, there's a correction that needs to be made, and I think that I'm the one that has to do it. And I'm going to flat out say that somebody yesterday a little wrong in what they had to say. And that somebody was me. I was sort of wrong. I mean, of course, I was using Olivia Wilde as an example of a director who I was saying could I don't know, she was throwing in the towel because I read this Medium article. Now, I read the Medium article that used her as an example. And I talked about how I thought Booksmart was one of the best directed debut features I'd seen in a while and how much I enjoyed the film. And I was a little quick on my assessment because Olivia Wilde is actually directing another movie before she directs Spider-Woman. And I'm very excited about the other movie. And today some news dropped how Shia LaBeouf, who was going to co-star in this film, has been replaced by Harry Styles, who is actually turning out to be quite a great young actor. And coincidentally, I got an email. Now, I don't know if it's from... I won't mention his name, but there is a producer in Hollywood who is one of my favorite producers. And he became big. Let's just say he saw an incoming trend from a foreign country and jumped all over that. Actually, many foreign countries, and jumped all over that. But he is quite a respected producer who has exceptionally, I think, good taste. And more often than not, he's made some great films. Now, I received an email from perhaps that person. I don't know. But if that was them and they are watching this show, I thank you for that. And anyway, I thought I would mention that Olivia Wilde is indeed directing another film, and which she also, by the way, is co-starring in. And that movie stars Florence Pugh. It did star Shia LaBeouf, Chris Pine, and Olivia Wilde is producing, directing, and it's called Don't Worry, Darling. And she's directing, producing, and co-starring in this 1950s psychological thriller for New Line. And what a cast. I mean, Florence Pugh, man. What a talk about a meteoric rise. And I have to tell you, I think that woman is one hell of an actress. So it's a period movie, and let's just say that one of the people that I admire is producing it as well. And its details are kept secret, but apparently, according to the Hollywood Reporter, its setting is an isolated utopian community in 1950s California and centers in the desert, and centers on a housewife who uncovers a disturbing truth about her seemingly perfect life. Count me in, people. Count me in. No shooting schedule set. New Line hopes to begin filming as soon as the coronavirus lockdown restrictions lift, and it's safe to do so. Heck, man, you can shoot in the desert. What more? Well, I don't know now. I don't know if the sun is out in the desert, because it's certainly not out here in Pasadena, building a shelf out in the very... you know what? I've never seen... Honestly, I feel like I have a 4K camera. I feel I should just be going out and shooting just a bunch of B-roll. The whole world looks like Tony Scott lit it. It looks like, vintage 90s Tony Scott. You don't even need gradiated filters. You can just put the camera around. There's smoke everywhere. I mean, I just want to get some friends together and go shoot out in the backyard. Just just something, I don't know what, kind of do what Joss Whedon did when he made Much Ado About Nothing. Just invite some friends over and, hey man, let's do a little improv acting exercise. Here's the premise, and let's just spend the afternoon shooting this movie, and we'll drive up in the hills or wherever, and just the smoke will be wafting through, and the movie is going to be about the last hours. I don't know, this I don't know. So I finally got my hands on this, the final hours, which I haven't seen yet, but I had to get it. I feel like we could make some apocalyptic end of the world movie, and why not just shoot it in a day? Like, bring your friends over, and it won't be a one-shot movie because we'd have to block that out, but you find your 10 favorite actors, and it's an outdoor party and we shoot it in real time. And we get what we get, and we just shoot the whole thing in a day. And I feel like I should, because it just gets smokier, and the sun comes out. The sun doesn't come out, and it's just smokier and smokier, and somebody should be shooting this. And there's ash falling in the sky. I figure it just kills me to see such free production design. You don't have to pay anybody. You don't have to pay for the effects. It's just there. And every time you want to get in a shot of the sun that's barely peeking through the smoke, it looks great. As a matter of fact, I would tell all my friends to bring their iPhones or whatever smartphone they have, and as long as they've got 4K cameras, we'll just, when the camera's not on you, you're just shooting the scene. You're shooting the coverage of the actor opposite you. And I figure, you know what? If I was thinking about this in the middle of the week, I would have set it up and I would have just done it. We got a little deck. I would have got some food, some wine, some booze, and I would have made some existential my end of the world with Andre. And I would have just thrown conversation topics to people and just shot it. And when someone else shows up, make sure then when you stop everything and get their entry into the party. I can't believe I'm not doing it. I feel like I've let everybody down. But I was thinking about it as I was building the shelf today. I'm like, why am I not shooting something right now in the backyard? Because I in the backyard, you can see on our deck, you can kind of see into the neighbor's backyard, and the neighbor's backyard, and the neighbor's backyard, and just the smoke in the trees as you descend back into infinity. I'm like, my God, get like a 30 millimeter lens and it was maybe 120 millimeter. Go the other way, and I'm like, I'm missing out on this. It could have been great, and if the fires keep burning, maybe I've got another day. Maybe I'll just tell everybody, hey, Wednesday, my house. Would you like to be in a movie? And just call my best actor friends. Don't worry, it'll be SAG compliant and all that. We'll do all of that stuff, I guess. Because I do WGA signatory, SAG signatory. I'd make sure that be all okay. But that's what I was thinking. Anyway, so Olivia Wilde's movie is coming out. Don't know when they're shooting, but Harry Styles replaced Shia LaBeouf, which, by the way, I think is a great choice. And yeah, so there you go. So I am sorry that I didn't announce this movie yesterday when I was talking about Olivia Wilde. She is making another indie film, which I do love. But it didn't say... I know she worked on the script for Booksmart, but she didn't work on the script for this, but that's okay. It's fine. But now to the topic at hand, ladies and gentlemen, gentle beings, kind souls. Some great news. So, as all of you know, I'm all about authorship. Because whenever you're consuming art or pop culture or whatever, it's really about the people who make it. Now, with a movie, as I've said a million times before, there's nothing I love better than being on a movie set. Being on a movie set, I mean, if you're not involved and you just come to visit a movie set, movie sets can be crushingly boring. As a matter of fact, what you find out when you're on a movie set is you might walk around and even when you're watching a scene, they'll shoot a scene. But if you're not savvy with what's going on and you're just visiting the set, it's very difficult to get a sense of what's actually happening. Now, the only way all of the cacophony and all of the stuff that happens on a movie set is all reduced to what you're seeing in the camera. That's all that matters, is what are you getting on your, well, now digital capture device, unless you're shooting on celluloid. But it all comes down to that. And usually you can see what's happening on the video, on the monitor, in Video Village, wherever you are. And look, Some directors don't want their actors to see what they've just shot. Some directors don't care. It depends, but I love it. I love being on a movie set because whether I'm directing or producing or whatever, I love seeing everybody work, and I just love watching the work on a movie set. I mean, I love it. But it's all to me about authorship, because the vision of a film, usually you've got great producers, obviously, but a great producer's job is to find the team that will realize the vision that the producer had in the first place. And I mean the active producer. I mean the producer that maybe acquired the material, found the script, whatever, and is shepherding that film into production. To me, there's really only one. There's many kinds of producers in Hollywood, but the only producer that I'm really interested in when I'm dealing with them, in terms of creativity is when you work with a producer that's found a piece of material that's been shepherding it sometimes for years, if not decades, to get made, because they have a vision for it, and then they're hiring the people that they believe is going to realize that vision. And I'll tell you something. Some of the most fun times that I've had, if I'm not an editor working for a director, I really love working with creative producers. And I'm talking about people that are on set that know what's going on. And I do prefer a combination of, well, line producers are great, but I really like producers that are both. They could act as a line producer. They understand all the money, but they also have creative ideas, because that way there's synergy in, like, okay, we have to shoot a scene where we've got this many extras, or we're in a restaurant. What can we do to maximize our time and minimize the amount of money that we're going to be spending on a scene? So finding great producers is always a great thing, and I consider myself one of those. But film, in terms of authorship, I mean, anything, whether you're your favorite writer, your favorite comic artist, or your favorite comic writer. But for me, it's always been directors. Since I was a kid, I followed directors, and producers. My first hero in the business when I was 5 years old was George Powell. He was the first name. George Powell was the first producer's name I ever knew, because he made Destination Moon, Conquest of Space, War of the Worlds, and When Worlds Collide. And by the way, thank you, Insignia out of Australia, for delivering my beautiful When Worlds Collide Blu-ray. I've waited for that for a very long time, and now I have it, thanks to you. So, War of the Worlds, you put that out before Criterion. Now you put out When Worlds Collide. So thank you very much for that. But, yeah, so authorship. And I get excited when certain filmmakers that I love, that are going to bring authorship to something, and it's exciting. And that's the reason I feel like I'm getting a vision. A lot of the time, I grew up loving my B movies, and or let's call them, they weren't A-list studio movies, but when I was a kid, especially during the dawn of the home video era, some of my great heroes were like John Carpenter. Because John Carpenter made films, I mean, he was making, I guess you could call them B movies, but they were genre movies, action films, horror films. I mean, he went from the expanded student film he did, Dark Star, which was a science fiction satire. Then he went to Assault on Precinct 13, which sort of was a retelling of Hawks' Rio Bravo, but in the middle of Los Angeles, which I loved. Then he did Halloween, The Fog, Escape from New York, The Thing, Christine, Starman. And Starman, I would not call that a B movie, but I loved when I would see his movies. I knew he was always going to shoot in Panavision, which meant it was going to be widescreen. Even when it was, I mean, he started with Assault on Precinct 13, was shot in Panavision, and then Halloween, of course, Dean Cundy's gorgeous widescreen photography, beautiful. But a John Carpenter movie had a feel to it. Even the font choices. I mean, after Halloween, there was the John Carpenter font, and from the beginning, it's John Carpenter's Halloween. It was part of the title treatment, and it was great. So whenever John Carpenter was making a movie, it didn't matter what it was. I'm like, I'm going to see a John Carpenter movie. Same was true of people like David Cronenberg, and to a certain extent, Joe Dante, John Landis. Did I say John Dante? Joe Dante, John Landis. There were a lot of directors that I would just go see their movies, no matter what, because you knew what you were getting. Catherine Bigelow became one after I saw her co-director, her first film that she co-directed, The Loveless. Again, I was a Catherine Bigelow fan. In the 80s, Near Dark, Rod Silver and Blue Steel. I mean, I would go see anything she made. And I've really never been let down by any of her movies. I mean, what? You can't go wrong because you know the way she's going to shoot and how she frames things. I mean, come on, Point Break. So I've always loved authorship, and that's what I get excited about. You know what else I get excited about? The Marvel Cinematic Universe. That's right. Now, whether you love the Marvel Cinematic Universe, like the Marvel Cinematic Universe, think it's pablum, I don't care. For me, as somebody who grew up reading Marvel comics, the entirety of the first 23 films of the Marvel Cinematic Universe have a great... They delivered what I, as a lifelong comic book fan, would want from them. And as I've said before on the show many, many times, they started out with Iron Man. I'm like, come on, is that going to work? Well, it did. And then they're going to make Thor, and I'm like, wait a minute, how are they going to make a Thor movie and have it interact in the same world as Iron Man? How is that going to work? Well, it did. And then Captain America, the First Avenger, a throwback period piece to World War II. Is that going to work? It worked like gangbusters. And then they're going to put all these people together? I know there's the Incredible Hulk too, but it was amazing to watch. And as for a comic book fan, you know, people act like I guess that the Marvel Cinematic Universe or the Marvel Comics universe it's not like Tolkien's Lord of the Rings. I mean, there's always been a certain pulp sensibility to it, a certain, I don't know, family-friendly atmosphere to the Marvel Cinematic Universe. I know that changed in the 80s and stuff when comic books got very dark. But they, for the most part, the Marvel Cinematic Universe, to me, is a very spiritually an incredible translation of the comic book universe onto screen. And I don't think anyone can argue that after 23 movies that they all average out with $1 billion box office gross. Right now, I mean, people think the Marvel Cinematic Universe is great and they think it made a lot of money, but, you know, it's not like it's there. You don't have The English Patient and you don't have Moonlight and you don't have Gandhi or 12 Years a Slave in the Marvel Cinematic Universe. Black Panther, maybe, but so people don't take it seriously, even though Kevin Feige is the most successful producer ever in the history of Hollywood. And I'm a huge fan of Kevin Feige. I've been saying for 5 years on the internet that he's my Lord and Savior of the cinematic universe of any kind. But in terms of the comic book movie, I'm a huge fan of what he has done. Now, Marvel is moving into a new phase. Black Widow is a prequel. It takes place after Civil War, but before Infinity War. So it's a prequel movie. So I would actually say it's probably the 24th movie in the Infinity Saga. What is the first new movie after the entire Thanos incident, the Infinity Saga? What is the first movie? Well, as you all know, the first movie that really has no ties at all to what happened, well, I'm sure it has some ties, is The Eternals. Here's the collection, the omnibus of Jack Kirby's work. Jack Kirby created the Eternals and the Deviants. Of course, the mantle was taken up later by Neil Gaiman. And I'm a huge fan. I am a huge fan. So, as you know, the Eternals has been shot. It's a movie that's done. And why do I suddenly find myself more excited than ever about the Eternals? Well, as some people know, it's being directed by a woman who was born in Beijing, first-generation Chinese immigrant, Chloe Zhao. And today, what happened to her today? Well, I'll tell you what happened to her today. She won the Golden Lion at the Venice Film Festival for her brand new movie, Nomadland, that stars Frances McDormand. Following a successful 2 weeks that marked the first major international event in the pandemic era, the Venice Film Festival drew to a close tonight as Cate Blanchett's jury handed out its awards. Despite a lack of major Hollywood fare, there was no shortage of well-received movies. One film from a studio, Searchlight's Nomadland, which, by the way, Searchlight, that means Searchlight is Disney, because it was Fox Searchlight, and they retained Fox Searchlight. You still have some of the executives were retained. So Searchlight, that has some of the best, they have one of the best track records in Hollywood in terms of releasing Oscar fare. They put out Nomadland, and it was directed by Chloe Zhao, and it stars Frances McDormand, and it took the Golden Lion for Best Picture. So there's a lot of talk of, one of the things about what Kevin Feige can do And we talked a little bit about how the difference between movies and television has been that traditionally in television, which is a writer-producer's medium, the showrunner is usually the creator, the writer, or whatever, and the directors don't have much power on TV. People have called them traffic cops or whatever. No, I think a good director, puts his imprimatur on TV episodes. I mean, look at somebody like Rob Bowman when he's starting out directing Next Generation and moved over to X-Files. He definitely had a style. And good TV directors do have a style, but they get things done on time and on budget, and television's very fast. And then when a director on television, they do an edit, and then they turn it in, and then the producers take over, and the producers finish the episodes. It's different in film. In film, a director is the auteur, and the director really pretty much ends with the director. So Chloe Zhao shot Nomadland after she shot The Eternals. It's finished. It just won the Golden Lion. Now, I was curious because Eternals is going to be a very different kind of Marvel movie. Of course, it spans apparently thousands of years. I would imagine same way Lord of the Rings does, because we saw the end of the Second Age at the beginning of Fellowship. But I'm fascinated by this movie, and I'm fascinated by Chloe Zhao as an auteur, and to know that Kevin Feige plucked her out. She hadn't done a whole lot, but the fact that he went and got her. This is why Kevin Feige's movies average out to making $1 billion. The MCU movies make $1 billion because he does things like, I go get the Russo brothers and they make Captain America Winter Soldier for me. And people are like, what? How could they do that? Well, because Kevin Feige said they can. So anyway, there's an article by Rebecca Keegan that was in the Hollywood Reporter on September 2nd. And it was published, and it was an interview with her. And here it is. And here is Chloe Zhao. I mean, come on. She looks formidable. Gotta love that. So she goes on and she talks a little bit about she cast misfits in her Marvel debut, and her uncompromising style. I shot exactly the way I wanted to shoot. And then she talks about this. I'll put this whole article in there. But what's interesting... well, I'll let you guys read that because it doesn't pertain to this necessarily, but it's a whole article about her making Nomadland and how it was done. Zhao, a Beijing-born NYU film school grad who broke out in 2017 with her poetic western, The Rider. McDormand found a filmmaker as game as she is, another woman who is in Hollywood, but not of it. I always get this feeling I want to challenge the status quo, says Zhao. I just don't want to be comfortable, because when I feel comfortable, I'm not quite sure what motivates me or gets me up in the morning. Nomadland is a movie about discarded older Americans that McDormand, 63, chose Zhao, 38, to tell it, reflects the kind of trust Zhao tends to inspire in people. She has won the faith of the cowboys she talked into acting in The Rider, a real-world nomads who co-star opposite Frances McDormand in No Man Land, and executives at Marvel who are overseeing Zhao's next, much more expensive film, Eternals. Since the week of August 10th, Zhao has been ensconced in an editing room on the empty Disney lot, completing post-production on both Nomadland and Eternals, which is due in February, and which features Gemma Chan, Angelina Jolie, and Marvel's first LGBTQ relationship in a story about an immortal alien race who has secretly lived on Earth for 7,000 years. Chloe will go toe-to-toe about Malik or an esoteric and small film has ever been made, but also on Star Wars or on the Japanese superhero franchise One Punch Man in a way that is quite unique and quite spectacular, says Marvel Studios president Kevin Feige. She would finish some giant production meeting with us that involved the creation and approval of dozens of costumes, creature designs, intergalactic designs, and then she would go into her half solar power, half corn oil, or whatever, it was this van, and drive out to the Dakotas for Nomadland. That she can fit in all of these environments is remarkable. I mean, clearly she's a creative force, and she's directed a Marvel movie the same movie she was finishing while she finished Nomadland, which is obviously a very personal film. It was a labor of love between her and Frances McDormand, and it wins the Golden Lion at Venice. This is the world that I was talking about that I want to live in. Unlike what I was saying yesterday, I guess Olivia Wilde is like her because she has two films. Olivia Wilde will be now a female director that's made two films and then she does a Marvel movie. Chloe Zhao is the same way. And obviously, Olivia Wilde has seen a lot in the business. Heck, she was in Tron Legacy, too. So she's probably a bit of a genre fan. To hear this excites me to no end. Now, she goes on, and let me see if I can... she goes on in this... she talks a lot about Nomadland, but she also talks about... she talks about manga, and this is particularly all about that, but I want to see if I can find the quote in here. So I should have found it before I went on, but I did not. Well, maybe it's not here. So Chloe Zhao is from Beijing. She was born Zhao Ting. Her father, the manager of a Beijing steel company. Her mother, a hospital worker who was in a performance troupe for the People's Liberation Army. I have interesting parents, says Zhao. They're just a bit different than your typical parents from Beijing. They're rebellious, they're weird. They never stop letting me be who I am. When my grades were so bad and I was just drawing weird manga, I was a wild child and they just let me be, and that's very rare. She grew up watching American films on TV. Ghost, Sister Act, and The Terminator are amongst her earliest recollections, and writing fan fiction, which she still does, although she declines to reveal for which properties. When I was in China, all I read and dreamt about was in the West, says Zhao. You want to go West, always go West. At 14, speaking little English, she left home to enroll in a boarding school in London, an experience she described as akin to attending Hogwarts. But still, the real West pulled at her, and when she was able to get a visa at 18, she moved to Los Angeles to a studio apartment in Koreatown, intending to attend college. After her parents dropped her off in L.A., Zhao realized she actually needed to finish high school first and enrolled in nearby L.A. High. Back home, the best high school is usually named after the place, said Zhao, so I went in the phone book and I saw L.A. High. I thought, I'm going to L.A. High. I just walked in one day and I go through the metal detector and I look around and I'm like, this is not what I thought America is. I definitely don't know America. This was not in the movies I saw, the music videos, or books I read. Zhao adapted quickly. A talent she has relied on for life experiences varied as going home for the holidays with a British boarding school classmate, tending bar in New York City, and shooting movies on South Dakota's Pine Ridge Indian Reservation. When an LA bus driver strike prevented her from getting around the city, she bought a skateboard to get to school. I'm used to being out here on my own in different situations and always wanting to fit in and playing different roles, says Zhao. Being a bartender in New York, your tip is all you've got, so you want to make your customers feel comfortable that they can talk to you. A lot of times, it's a bit like that when you go out there and meet people while making a film. People ask me, how do you get non-actors to feel comfortable with you? Really, you just listen to their stories. Zhao earned a bachelor's degree in political science at Mount Holyoke and attended film school at NYU, where Spike Lee was one of her teachers. Her first feature, Songs My Brothers Taught Me, which follows a rebellious teen on South Dakota's Pine Ridge Indian Reservation, premiered at Sundance and Cannes in 2015 and secured a tiny theatrical release. So this is her fourth film. Eternals is her fourth film. Maybe it's an only child thing and I wanted attention, says Zhao. When everyone was making films in New York, I went, no, I just want to go somewhere that nobody goes and to see what's there. Zhao found the inspiration for her second film on Pine Ridge, as well as real-life cowboy Brady Jandreau, whose story she thinly fictionalized for The Rider. It was on the strength of The Rider that Zhao booked Nomadland and The Eternals and saw major life changes. She paid off her student loans and joined the DGA, securing health insurance for the first time. She and her boyfriend, cinematographer Joshua James Richards, who has worked on all of her films, moved from Denver, where they had lived because of its proximity to Pine Ridge, to Ojai, bringing the two cattle dogs, Taco and Rooster, she had adopted from the reservation. She since has acquired 3 chickens after what she calls a pandemic freakout. After a childhood spent in cities, Zhao decided Ojai was as close as she wanted to be to Hollywood. I spent so much time in South Dakota, I realized I actually can think better if there's a lot of silence, she says, and I find the industry is quite noisy. So when I go back to the very David Lynch-like suburban street I live on, very Blue Velvet Street, I feel weirdly grounded. All right, I'm going to put this article in the live chat. Now, reading about her, what excites me is that there is indeed authorship. Clearly, she's a visionary. And the fact that she was tapped by Kevin Feige to direct Eternals based on her 2 previous films, I think says a lot about what we're going to get. Not only that, I think it says a lot about what we're going to get from the next phase of the Marvel Cinematic Universe. Look, they could continue on doing what they're doing, but unless they make sweeping changes, and I've maintained that they're going to have to do what they did in the first place, the Eternals in my mind, is kind of like Iron Man, in the sense that people are like, Iron Man? Who's Iron Man? Like, outside the comic books, we all kind of knew who Iron Man was, but let's face it, Iron Man? Little archaic, maybe not as cool as we might think. I see the Eternals as being exactly the way Iron Man was when they were going to establish the MCU. The Eternals are not that well known in comic book circles. Even Marvel fans are not up on the Eternals as much as they might be. And I think the Black Knight, they've thrown in that, even that character, not as well known. And they've hired a woman like Chloe Zhao, who's made 3 independent films. Well, she had only made 2 when Kevin Feige hired her. Now she has a 3rd one that just won the Golden Lion. And I just, reading more about her, I'm like, this is the kind of creative visionary who is exactly the kind of author that I've got to throw in my towel behind. I mean, that's somebody that I'm in. I got to join that. I'm going to join that, jump on the Chloe Zhao train, and I'm going to take it all the way across the country to wherever I'm going to be taken by that train. I am in 100%. The more you hear about her, the more I'm thinking, my God, Kevin Feige is making, in terms of people talk about David O. Selznick, but the people that he's getting, to make these movies. I mean, he's finding people that their voices are very distinct, and he's allowing those voices to come through within the Marvel Cinematic Universe. James Gunn, Taika Waititi, the Russo brothers, and now Chloe Zhao. I mean, this is interesting. These are interesting choices that no other studio, well, maybe a studio would give people like Chloe Zhao a shot after you win the Golden Lion, but she hadn't won the Golden Lion when Kevin Feige tapped her. And having 3 films under your belt and going to do the Eternals, I don't think Chloe Zhao is going to be stuck in the Marvel Cinematic Universe for the rest of her life, unless she wants to be. And when she talks about her influences being things like manga and being movies from the West, steeped in all of this. So she's somebody who really has something to say. Now, I don't know her. I've never met her in my life. I'd like to have, but I haven't. And I just reading about her, and she's definitely gone to like Olivia Wilde. She's a new emergent talent, and she's been making movies. She's had 4 movies in 5 years. That's pretty damn good for a filmmaker, especially in this day and age. And she's clearly got a unique voice, and this is exciting. And so this is what it's almost the exact opposite of what I was saying yesterday. But what's interesting is when you are reading about filmmakers like this, they're going to be able to do they'll make Eternals. And I think whatever we're going to get with Eternals, it's going to be special. It's going to be something. Now, everybody might not like it. It might have a very different feel. I mean, she talks about in some of these interviews how she's a huge Terrence Malick fan, and she's been influenced by Terrence Malick. And Terrence Malick looked at Nomadland and gave her notes, which is spectacular. And how exciting is that? I mean, for those of you, I don't know if many imagination connoisseurs, look, if you haven't seen a Terrence Malick movie, go back and watch Badlands, go back and watch Days of Heaven, go back and watch The Thin Red Line, and watch the New World, and I would suggest watching especially the brand new version of Tree of Life that Criterion released on Blu-ray. I mean, a lot of his movies they can be a difficult watch, but they're certainly unique. And I don't think he'll ever make a Marvel movie, but hey, you never know. But that she's influenced by Terrence Malick is pretty damn exciting. And I for one, after she won the Golden Lion, and I read this morning, I'm like, all right, man. Because I've talked about how excited I am about Eternals. I think Eternals is going to be a very different movie. Because, look, the Marvel Cinematic Universe has to change. They can't, if Kevin Feige gave everybody the same thing, well, then the expectation, I can't even imagine what it's like to have a publicly held company just expect that your movies are going to make $1 billion. I mean, that expectation, that would drive me insane. But he seems to keep pulling it out. And I think it's because of the ballsy, gutsy decisions he's made. And it's pretty incredible. So here's my big vote of confidence for Chloe Zhao as the director of the Eternals. And my excitement level, which was already high for this movie, I am untethered. My chain is broken. It's off the chain. I'm off the chain. I'm off the chain with excitement about this movie. So for all of the craziness that's happening, this is pretty cool news. And it's pretty exciting. And also, for all these people that talk about we have to be more inclusive, inclusiveness or inclusion is just going to happen. It's going to happen when more and more people start picking up. I mean, Chloe Zhao, by her own admission, she was a bartender in New York City. She did go to film school, but I mean, listen to her. She just came to LA and went to LA High. I mean, she talked about being a self-forged woman, and she decided to go into film, and she did. And I think the only way to, and I'm sure a lot is going to be made of her being Chinese and also being a woman. But you know what? Eventually, even that's going to go away, because she represents actually exactly what America is supposed to be. You're an immigrant. You come over here. You've got offbeat parents that allow you to be yourself, and you can go on your own path and make it happen. It's you got to flash dance your life, man. Flash dance your life. What does that mean? That means take your passion and make it happen. Flash dance. So flash dance your life, people. Flash dance your life. That's what she did. Chloe Zhao flash danced her life. And everybody should flash dance their life. Because we're all maniacs, right? That's right. Anyway, that's all I want to say. I'm very excited. Very excited to see Eternals. Can't wait for a trailer to drop. I'm sure it'll be in front of Black Widow, but I am really, really excited for this movie, because for someone who has her kinds of influences and the fact that she's a person of two worlds and that she's pretty much a self-made woman, I mean, come on now. That's what I want to see. And did I not put the article? This article is really good because it's a great profile of the making of Nomad Land. I keep wanting to say No Man's Land, but that's not what it is. So there is the article. And I can't wait. I can't wait. I think it's going to be a great film. I think she's a perfect director for it. And what's not to be excited about? In this day and age, I mean, literally, the world is on fire outside my door. Literally. But you know what? I'm building the shelves. I'm working on a film project myself. I'm getting storyboards in. I'm very excited. I got news to tell you about the last film I produced, but I can't tell it yet. But hey, all I can say is, if you've ever wanted to see Tango Shalom, there's places you're going to be able to see it, and I'm excited for that. So hey, and the Netflix show dropping in March. They moved it, so things are happening. I can't believe how much I'm getting done sitting here in the Robservatory during this time. So, I guess things are happening. Or as they said in Mad Max, was it Mad Max Beyond Thunderdome? Yes. Dice are rolling. And that's the way life should be. You should always have some dice that are rolling. Throw those dice and see what you come up with. Anyway, let's see what you guys have come up with, guys, girls. And by the way, for those people that... Yesterday, I was having a little bit of a technical difficulty. I had a lot of generous super chats come in yesterday, and I didn't see them. And some of them didn't get answered. I wanted you to know last night I did a companion video for yesterday's show. So if you sent me a super chat yesterday that I did not read on the show, one, I profusely apologize. But two, I did a 20-minute video where I answered all the super chats, but I only half answered one question. And I want to answer the full question now. And that question was, what was it like to work with William Shatner on Free Enterprise? And I guess, you know what I'm going to do? I think the easiest way to start that would be to show you a scene, and then I would talk about that scene. And this is a scene... So for those of you who don't know, 20 years ago, I made a movie called Free Enterprise. And it was basically a Ramona Clef on my own life. And it was made by Pandora creator, the showrunner and creator of Pandora, the CW series, Mark A. Altman, and myself. And the characters in the movie are called Mark and Rob. And Rob is played by Rafer Weigel, and Mark is played by Eric McCormack, who later became Will on Will and Grace. And the whole movie was about turning 30 and being geeks in LA and what was going to happen. And we wrote William Shatner into this script. Now, we didn't know William Shatner. We hadn't met William Shatner. But we just figured, well, why wouldn't he want to be in our for first-time filmmakers, why wouldn't William Shatner want to be in our independent movie? I don't advise that as a method of getting people to be in a movie. But you know what? I'm repeating the exact same thing with this new project that I'm working on. No, it's not William Shatner, but there are other people that I just assume are going to be in this project. Because why not? I know you're never supposed to assume anything because it makes an ass out of you and me. But hey, so I'm going to play this scene. This is the scene where Mark and Rob, Eric McCormack and Rafer Weigel as Mark and Rob, meet William Shatner for the first time. And I did put this up on the YouTube channel, but if you haven't seen it, so this is from Free Enterprise, a movie that I directed, I co-wrote, and I edited. So here you go.
Listen, when I'm with a woman, I know that I'm going to climax. I mean, it's not even an issue. You know, all guys come. I'm more interested in participating in my partner's orgasm. You know, women become very, very spiritual before orgasms.
Oh my God.
Besides, as I was led to believe, ladies first.
Oh my God. Oh my God.
Right, that's exactly what they say. I don't believe it. It's Bill.
Okay, just be cool. Don't stare. You'll go blind.
And he's perusing porno. All right. I gotta go over there and talk to him, man.
What do you... No. All around the world, from as far off as the Caspian Sea, people have been running up to Bill and acting like idiots. Why must you be one of them?
Because now it's my turn. I mean, don't you want to go over there and talk to him and see what he's like? I mean, William Shatner made us who we are today.
Would you want to insult the man? Just respect his space.
I do respect his space. It's the final frontier.
Okay, just be dignified, you know? Don't do anything stupid.
All right.
Calm, cool, and collected. Don't make a big scene. Oh, good. I've been looking for Mein Kampf.
Sir, Mr. Shatner, I would like to say that I think you are the greatest American actor ever.
I'm a Canadian.
Well, then, may I just say that you are the greatest Canadian actor ever.
There aren't that many of them.
Well, if I may, sir, just say that I have a tremendous amount of respect for your work as a writer, a director, a thespian, and an entrepreneur. Listen, we don't want an autograph or anything like that. I was just wondering, what brings you here?
I'm trying to find something to read.
You buy books?
Otherwise, it'd be shoplifting.
Listen, I'm sorry. We don't want. We're not. We were just wondering if we could buy you a drink or something. I mean, we're not the usual kooky fans.
No.
Right.
We can... we couldn't help but sense that there's something wrong. Are you perturbed about something?
Yes, I am. If it'll, stop you from following me around, I'm having trouble with the story I'm writing, okay?
I sense that. That's the worst. I get the same thing myself.
Are you a writer?
Yes, actually.
No, are you really? Is that block the worst thing?
Absolutely. We discuss it all the
Can't
time.
do anything.
We're actually both
about it.
industry professionals.
Yeah, I work
you
over
really?
at Full Eclipse.
Really?
Yeah.
Are you a higher up, a big muckety-muck?
Well, I mean, I just directed a little thing that's called Beach Babe Bimbo.
I know. It's funny. I was over there this morning pitching my latest opus, Brady Killer, and looks like it's going to be a go. Probably.
Oh, congratulations.
Yeah,
That's
yeah.
great. That's great. I've got an idea, you know.
So there you go. That was a clip from our film Free Enterprise, and that was the scene, obviously, where Mark and Rob, the characters Mark and Rob, loosely based on ourselves, meet William Shatner for the first time. That was shot in the old version. There still is a video. There was the Iliad bookstore that used to be next to Odyssey Video. which I thought was great. The Iliad bookstore moved. It was right where Vineland met Lancashire. And the Iliad bookstore is still there, but they moved it. And that was an interesting scene because we were originally, when we were making Free Enterprise, it was during El Nino, so all the locations that we had scouted, some that I had storyboarded, were all rained out. And we were going to shoot that scene at a Crown Books that had these really, really long aisles of books. And that's why I liked it. It was really long, like this long, I mean, very, very long. And that was a day that we had hired a Steadicam operator because I was going to have them do this whole elaborate chase up and down these long things. Well, it got rained out. The bookstore flooded. Like it flooded the day of this is what it was like making Free Enterprise. So in the middle of the day, we were shooting at we were going to be shooting at a bar for half the day where they were playing pool, and then we moved to the bookstore. The company moves in an independent movie, moving 2 locations across town. So I had said, this is a last minute thing. I said, well, listen, we can't shoot at that bookstore, and you can't ruin your schedule. I'm like, can we shoot at the Odyssey? Pardon me, can we shoot at the Iliad bookstore? And because they also had these long stacks. And they're like, that's a great idea. Sure. So the producers go off, Mark and Dan Bates, they go off and they have to arrange, can we go to an open store? Hey, can we come to your store tonight and shoot a movie? And they said, yes, we can. Well, what I did not know when we got there, the whole reason I thought about the Iliad bookstore is because they had these, you could follow somebody around up and down with the camera. So I was thinking you go down and you turn around. So when we got there, those stacks that you saw of books, one of the walls, the wall that you don't see in the movie, was under construction. There was no books on the wall, and it was just construction. So you could never point the camera the other direction. So you couldn't follow up, down. So I'm like, what I had wanted to do, I couldn't do. So I don't know. I was kind of frustrated about it because we get there and the setup is good. We shot this when he falls over in Mein Kampf. There was 3 sections in the bookstore. So there was the front section, which you haven't seen, it was earlier. There's the middle section where they came up to the books shelves. He takes down the Twilight Zone book and then sees Shatner. And then there was the scene where they look through the books. They're following him around in the end. So it was broken into three rooms, and that's how we were shooting it. But the final version, and it wasn't, I didn't even come up with this. I think it was Eric McCormack, or maybe it was Shatner, and we're just trying to figure out, they could see I was frustrated because, when you think about how you're going to shoot something, you tried to be prepared, and I had in my mind, and then Shatner's like, well, what if we did it as a oneer? I was like, a oneer? And then a oneer means you do it as one shot. So the scene when they come and they look down the aisle at him and he looks back, the camera was supposed to go up and down and around like an S, but I couldn't do that. So, and that would, when you're doing it that way, it's kind of their points of view. That's how I was going to do it. But I'm like, okay, can we do it as a oneer? And I was thinking, what can you do? Now, this is typical for independent movies. You can't, if you're locked into doing something, and I almost fell into this trap, and making Free Enterprise was incredibly frustrating because the whole end of the movie was supposed to be a beach party. The beach got rained out because of El Nino. The state of California closed the beaches, couldn't shoot there. So the movie was a series of compromises or a series of creative challenges, and you have to live up to those creative challenges. So we did it as a oneer, and it worked. It really worked, and you had them looking down. And I thought visually it was pretty interesting because you saw them peeking down at the end and then coming around and 1 and 2 and cornering him. It actually worked out really, really well, I thought. But again, that was a compromise, but that's what you do. You have to make good when you're shooting a film, and when you're making an independent movie on location, a company move every day, 2 locations every day. It was insane. Nobody should ever make a movie that way, but we did. And so the question, what was it like to work with Shatner? It was amazing to work with William Shatner because it was the first movie that I ever made, first movie I ever directed. I directed little things and stuff, music videos, but I'd never made a feature. And I'm dealing with Shatner as an actor. I've told stories on this show before about what it was like to work with him, but one of the things that was really interesting about Shatner doesn't suffer fools gladly. And when you're working in television, you don't have time to do like 20 takes. So one of the things that was great about working with Shatner is as long as I knew what I wanted, and I did, and I had told William Shatner at the beginning, he's basically playing a character named Bill. He's playing himself. But my big note to him when we were meeting and doing notes, because we did note sessions with him with the script, and I said to Bill, I go, it was always Bill, not Mr. Shatner, not William Shatner, just Bill. And I would say, Bill, the key to making this movie work for me is about tone, and your character, the tone of your character is particularly important. And I'd watched a lot of Shatner's comedy, whether it was Airplane 2, whether it was there's a show called Fridays that used to be on Saturday Night Live, Get a Life, those appearances. Shatner tends to go big in his comedy, broad, and the movie wouldn't have worked if it was broad. So I said to him, my big directorial note to him was, because I wasn't going to tell Bill Shatner how to play Bill Shatner, but I told him, I said, the key to this movie, the reason it's going to work, is everybody has to wonder the entire film, are you being serious or are you insane? And you have to play it that way. So it's got to be much more deadpan. It's not big broad comedy. It's there's an absurdity to it, but it's got to be sincere. You have to be able to believe that you're really convinced, you believe, and he completely got that. And so I think he liked the fact he liked our young enthusiasm. Hey, let's put on a show. I've got a barn, whatever. And it worked. So working with him was just fantastic. And obviously we had trailers a few times, but we were a low budget, stripped down production, way less than $1 million. And we were shooting ambitiously. I think we shot in 42 locations in 24 days. I mean, it was insane. It was really insane. So working with him was incredible. And I'll tell you a story. There's a long scene in a club in the movie. And we were only in this location for a day and a half. It was this huge club. We knew we were going to go over 12 hours. It was going to be a 16-hour day. It was scheduled as a 16-hour day. And we knew that from the beginning. And he knew that. So we told Shatner, we're like, okay, we're going to be going overtime. It's going to be a 16-hour day because we have so much work we have to do in this one big location. It was our biggest day, well, maybe our second biggest day, but our biggest day on a location that we didn't really, it was at a club. It was called the Garden of Eden. It was a club that was on the corner of La Brea and Hollywood Boulevard. It's a club, big club. And it was going to be difficult to make our day. And he knew that. And from the time he came to set, because he was in every scene, to the time he left, I mean, after 14 hours, he was lighting up a cigar on set. My dad's actually in that scene, and my dad and him smoke cigars. And he had as much energy in hour 16 when we wrapped as he did, or at least he's an actor, so he let us know that he did. It was amazing. It was an amazing time. And I would work with him again in a heartbeat. He was just terrific to work with. And we did have a phenomenal time. And I hope one day, perhaps, to work with him again. One never knows. So there you go. Now that was the final super chat question that I needed to answer. So I apologize for not. I answered one half of the question you asked me, but I forgot to answer that when I finished the video. So there you go. And you can see. By the way, the only version of Free Enterprise you can get, that is I've been working on a new version of the film. That scene's in the original version, but this was my preferred aspect ratio of 2:3:9 to 1. There's only one version you can see online, and I don't recommend it. It's 4:3, so it's square. The sound mix is wrong. The edits are different. It's an inferior version of the movie that was made back in 1999, and it's in standard def. So the sound mix isn't the same. So if you see the movie, I would recommend getting the Anchor Bay DVD. It doesn't exist in HD yet. Hopefully I'll be able to get it out there. But unfortunately, there's not a good version of it. What I'd like to do, my next goal is to get Free Enterprise out remastered in 4K with these new versions. What you saw, there's not one edit. You would never know this, but if there's not one edit in this sequence that is the same as it was. I mean, they've been tweaked. Sometimes it's 3 or 4 frames. Sometimes it's half a second, but the edits are now exactly where I would want them to be. So I have 3 clips from Free Enterprise that are up on the Burnettwork that you can go see of William Shatner, and I recently put them up. So you can check them out. This first letter comes from Captain Spire, sends a letter in. I enjoyed many of the 1969 Reader's Digest stories. I remember the horrible descriptions of war in the novel Before the Dawn. I delighted reading Brian Jacques' novel, finally able to remember one character from another in his stories. And I love science fiction. The Wing Commander novels by William Fortune were well written, and the conglomeration of stories in the book Nanotech really inspired me to see the human consequences of hyper-technologies. I have so many notes on novels I've wanted to publish, but it seems almost impossible nowadays. How in the world can anyone write a novel without someone saying, "You stole my idea from this one thing I wrote down 40 years ago," or have some large company steal it and sue me for having the idea before them? I wanted to write dozens of small short stories before bothering to try a novel. Is it even worth the effort? Well, Captain Spire, I would say this. Nowadays, if you want to do anything, like, I made Free Enterprise 20 years ago. Nobody remembers. I mean, some people do, but it's forgotten. It's kind of a forgotten movie that fell through the cracks. Didn't make very much money. Didn't make any money at all, really. And it was popular before the real explosion of the internet. I mean, I might have had a career if the internet was alive because people would see more of it. But would I? If you ask me if I knew now what I knew then, would I have still made the movie? Hell yes, I would have. And the real question is, you have to ask yourself. When you grow up as a film fan, I thought that I would have a long career, and I thought I would be making movie after movie after movie. And while I've produced movies and made that movie and edited a lot of movies, none of them have been they haven't burned up the box office chart. I think that the thing that I'm most remembered for is I co-produced the Agent Cody Banks movies. People can't believe that. And when they look at the credits, I'm the only producer, even though I'm the co-producer. I'm the only producer on Agent Cody Banks that has his own single card credit in the main titles of the movie. Because you don't get what you deserve, you get what you negotiate. Remember that. That's one of the Burnett axioms about Hollywood. Actually, it's about anything. It ain't show friends, it's show business. But that's what Bob Sugar said. But I think that anything is worth doing. Any creative endeavor is worth doing. It all depends what you think is going to happen because of it. Writing. I would love to write a novel. I admire anybody that has written novels. I mean, our own B.L. Alley has written a number of novels. You can go get them on Amazon right now. My very good friend Bill Hunt, who's the Digital Bits website. He's been covering physical media for 20 years. I've known him for 15 years, and we've worked together. And he has written his first novel, which is outstanding. I've read various iterations of it as he was writing it, and it's part of a whole series that he's launching. Now, he's been looking into getting a publisher or a manager, an agent, something like that. He hasn't done that yet, but he's deep into the second book, but it's something he's wanted to do. Now, the real question is, why do you want to do these things? Are you looking for fame and fortune? Well, if you're looking for fame and fortune, I would say don't do it for that reason. Do it because it's something you like to do. Or as Khan told Marla McGivers, go or stay, but do it because it is what you wish to do. And I would say that any creative endeavor is worth doing. Any creative endeavor is worth doing. I'll tell you something. If you write a novel or a short story or anything, you've brought something into the world that didn't previously exist. Don't worry if there are concepts or things that are look, the idea of child vampires. I don't know if there was a child vampire before Interview with a Vampire, the novel, but Catherine Bigelow's Near Dark has a child vampire in it. That's kind of similar to that. I mean, that definitely, I'm sure, came out of the Interview with a Vampire book. But should you not put those things in there? No, there's plenty of shared concepts when you're working in certain genre areas. I mean, there's a lot of things. There's a lot of overlap. I mean, don't worry. No one's gonna come and steal stuff. Don't worry about someone stealing stuff from you. A lot of people use that as an excuse. Forget that, because you might have one element that's similar to 100 other novels, but it's how you use that element, what you're going to do with it, and the story that you want to tell. So my advice to anybody that's looking to to do anything creative, I would say do it. But it really depends on the back end. I mean, there's a lot of people that expect, I want to be a famous person. You know, I'm going to write the great science fiction novel and win a Hugo. Well, that's great. I thought I was going to become Steven Spielberg or John Carpenter or Stanley Kubrick or a combination of the three or two or whatever, David Cronenberg. But if that's what you're looking to achieve, I mean, look at all the great artists that weren't recognized as great artists until after they were dead. You know, creative endeavors are worthy or worthwhile for their own sake. You'll learn more about yourself. I mean, it's always about living a good life, living your best life, right? If you want the accolades and the riches and the wealth and all that comes with things, don't do it. Don't do it. Because here's the thing, the lesson I've talked about Hollywood that a lot of people don't understand. People think that when you've made films and you achieve Hollywood success, you get to go to red carpet events and you get to go to great parties and hobnob with celebrities and beautiful people. People think that that's what they want, and that when they've achieved that, their life will somehow change. And more importantly, they will change. They will feel different. They will be somehow better. I assure you, if there's one lesson I can impart to you, that is not true. That is not true. You don't feel different. As a matter of fact, if anything, you're going to start feeling even weirder about yourself than you do now. Not that I'm saying everyone feels weird about themselves, but don't expect to be treated any differently simply because you've done something. Nowadays, like when I would go home back to Seattle and talk to my friends from high school, people are like, hey man, you made a movie, that's cool. Let's go snowboarding. You know, they just still look at you as you. They don't, I mean, sometimes people go, oh, you're whatever, but for the most part, it doesn't change who you are. You know, I certainly don't walk around and tell people I've made movies. You know, it's not what I lead with. Now I'm a YouTube star or something. Now people think, hey, I saw your YouTube show, dude. It'd be nice to be like, oh, did you ever get The Hills Run Red Blu-ray? You watch the movie and see it? People are like, I don't buy physical media. But your YouTube show, you know, I'm like, but what about the, oh, okay. So you can't worry about those kind of things. If you want to write a book, write the damn book. Go do it. Don't use anything out there in the ether as an excuse to not do something. Because there's too much of that. Write the damn book. Write it. And now you can self-publish it. I mean, maybe you'll make 6 cents from it, but you still did it. You can get up every morning and know that you did this thing that other people have always said they wanted to do, but you did it. So, Captain Spire, keep us informed. I expect to read that damn book, or at least, if I'm not going to read it, I expect to see the link somewhere. And good luck. Do it. Keep us abreast. Omar94 is here. Omar94 says, hi, Rob. I don't know why, but I feel like going to the movies is not that special of a thing anymore. Oh, man, are you going to bum me out, Omar94? Don't get me wrong. I get very excited to go to the movies because I'm interested in seeing a new movie, but after going through with it and thinking about it, I realized it wasn't that big of a deal to me. Even before COVID-19, I felt like that. Maybe because I feel movies are no longer on par with movies of the past, even when there are movies I like now. For example, if it was from another generation and I went to the movies, it probably might have been a more special thing because of what was releasing. Like, if it was the 70s and I went to a theater and I saw Jaws, A New Hope, you wouldn't see A New Hope in the 70s. You would have seen Star Wars because Star Wars was not called A New Hope until the 80s. Just I want to point that out. Godfather 1 and 2, and that would have changed my perception about going to the movies. If I was in the 80s and I saw the first 3 Indiana Jones films, Empire Strikes Back, Back to the Future, Ghostbusters, Die Hard, When Harry Met Sally, Lethal Weapon 1 and 2, Terminator, that would also make going to the movies feel like something special. The same with movies from the 90s, like Jurassic Park, Terminator 2, Die Hard 3, Forrest Gump, Shawshank Redemption, etc. I don't know if that makes sense to you since I'm trying to get a grasp of it myself. Thanks and live long and prosper. Actually, Omar, this is I really like this letter. I think here's what you are responding to. Because I feel the exact same way. And all those movies you mentioned, I did see them in the movie theater when they were first coming out. And I'll tell you what has changed. What has changed is when you went to the movies back in the day, one, you got incredible experiences because you had never had, no one had ever made a movie like Jaws before. Certainly no one had ever seen anything like it. Same with Star Wars, same with The Exorcist. I mean, even Logan's Run. And then after Star Wars, Superman the movie, Alien, Dawn of the Dead, the horror films that were coming out. The explosion of sci-fi in the wake of Star Wars and Empire. 81, you got Superman 2. And then, of course, 82 in one summer, between May and July, Conan the Barbarian. Star Trek 2, Poltergeist, Blade Runner, E.T., Tron, John Carpenter's The Thing, The Road Warrior. That was all in 2 months. And you were going to the theater and you were seeing these things that were all classic films. No one had ever seen anything like them before, because what has happened is, like with everything else, movies have become way more expensive. They've become controlled by corporate interests. Not that they weren't always, but, Warner Brothers used to be owned by Kinney Shoes, the shoe company. And the financial risk for films, especially on the studio level, is very, very different. So what they're doing now is they're making movies for the masses that can be seen by global audiences. So by definition, the movies have very familiar content. And the movies that you see in the theaters, the movies that we go, the spectacles, they're more familiar. You don't see things that hit you on, like some of my favorite movies. A movie that really changed my life, Bob Fosse's All That Jazz. That was a film I saw when I was 12 years old, and it was hugely influential with me. The way it's not just an autobiographical story of an artist, a filmmaker, and a choreographer. It's Bob Fosse really talking about himself. It's also an epic fantasy movie that deals with the anthropomorphized of death, the personification of death, Angelique and Jessica Lange's character, the editorial style, how it moves in and out of fantasy and flashback. It's probably the film project that I'm working on now that I want to direct and I've wanted to make for a very long time is very heavily influenced by All That Jazz, even though it has absolutely nothing to do with it, aside from one element. And I just think that I can't remember the last time I saw a movie like that. And it's just because the world has changed. And I think that, unfortunately, we're all looking to have that transcendent experience. Like when I was growing up, it was always that way. Like you would go see these films that would promise you something and deliver. I remember going to see Phantasm. Phantasm feels like a kid's movie now, but my dad took me to see it Saturday morning, the first show. I think it was at noon or something. I've told the story about how it was R-rated, so he took me in. He watched the first 5 minutes after Tommy gets killed in the cemetery and goes home. Then he left, and I watched the movie, and he went out and smoked a cigar for 90 minutes or whatever and let me watch it. And I loved it. I mean, even a low-budget movie like Phantasm was so unique and so much fun, and I hadn't seen anything like it before. And you walked out of the movie theater satisfied, like, wow, that was great. I love that. And nowadays, everything that we see in movie theaters is in some way sort of derivative. And you don't see those transcendent. I mean, the last time I think I went to the movies, look, I'm not going to lie. When I look at Infinity War and I can't believe it exists. And I love Infinity War. I love Infinity War because reading, I've been looking at and going through, my comic collection, and, whether it's Shogun Warriors or Daredevil or Alpha Flight, or here's the first issue of Swamp Thing. I mean, when I saw Infinity War and I'd watched the MCU, I just couldn't believe what I was watching existed, and there was verisimilitude within the frame, and that all these characters were living and breathing in front of me. So I did love that. I didn't think that I would ever. The Marvel Cinematic Universe has delighted me to no end, to be honest, and some of the DC movies have too. But the last time a movie totally blew me away at the theater, I mean, probably The Matrix. When I saw The Matrix, I was so taken. It came out of nowhere. I was so taken aback by it, and the moment where the red pill, the blue pill, you get red pilled and you wake up. I mean, I I was blown away. I couldn't even. I'd seen all these movies. I'm like, holy! Between the bullet time effects and that, my mind was blown. And that was in 1999. That was the same year Free Enterprise came out, and it was 21 years ago. And that was the last time a movie. I still love movies. I still like to watch movies, but they're all sort of variations on themes now. And I think that's what you're responding to. I mean, think about it. You're talking about movies. Go back to Empire Strikes Back. It's 40 years old. But don't fret. I mean, ultimately it's going to happen. I've read so many different horror novels and so many different science fiction novels. I feel the same way about everything that I like. Stephen King even. Stephen King unto himself. You know, you read Stephen King novels and sometimes they're good and sometimes they're all right. But you think back to reading Stephen King novels, at least I do, when I was a kid, whether it was The Shining or whether it was Salem's Lot, or especially The Stand, The Dead Zone. I mean, these books lingered in my mind. I couldn't believe them, and my worldview was changed by Stephen King books. And to expect that 40 years later, a Stephen King book would still have that effect, you know, because it becomes familiar. Stephen King is a genre unto himself. So I still take enjoyment from these things. I just don't expect them to change my life the way that they used to. And I think that's just a product of the world that we live in. But I think what's great, what you can't forget, is that the magic of cinema remains. And remember, there's a lot more movies out there to discover that you haven't seen that are going to change your life that way. I mean, you never know. I would actually have to say, I talk about The Matrix, but another movie that came out 2 years later, Amélie. The French film Amélie just shook me to my core because I had never seen a film. I mean, it's this sweet, if you watch it, I mean, the movie's, to me, it's about an existential way of life that I'd never seen a movie that encapsulated how much I just like being alive and the possibility that where you can see magic down your street corner, you know, and I'd never seen anything that encapsulated that. I mean, there was a point in Amélie in that movie where I literally just started, like, I'm watching it. I was like, but I literally was sobbing. Like, tears were pouring down my face. And it was the scene, if you haven't seen the movie, but it's the scene where Amélie finds this treasure box in her wall that was put there by a previous tenant, tracks this person down and gives the box back to this guy, and it's a box of his childhood treasures. Now he's like a middle-aged dude, and he opens it up in a phone booth and looks at it and has this response, and I totally got what that would be like. I mean, at that moment, I just literally just involuntary tears just pouring down my face, just oh my god. And I'm sitting next to my buddy Steve Melching. We're in Spain. We're at the Sitges Film Festival, and Amélie, it was Kyushu Kurosawa's Pulse, which was amazing. I don't remember which came first, Pulse or Amélie. But both of those movies I love for very different reasons. But Amélie, same thing. And I watched it. I didn't expect that. You know, the reason I even went to Amélie was because when you take the train into Barcelona, it was like, you know, it's like a 20-kilometer train ride from Sitges to Barcelona. So sometimes I do that every day. There were Amélie posters all over downtown Barcelona. And I'm like, it's just, you know, Audrey Tauto's face, her little smiling face. I'm like, I don't know what this movie is, but I'm going to go see it just because it's everywhere. I'd never heard of it because, you know, in America, it was a foreign film that hadn't even been promoted yet. And you will find movies, you know, you will find movies you haven't seen. I mean, you're obviously watching, you're a cineast, you're watching all kinds of movies from the history of Hollywood, and you're seeing stuff that's blowing you away. And I think that's a good thing. I mean, remember now, the reason movies are being made, the people that are making them, the concern of studios is much bigger than it ever was, where before, even when you had directors like, I don't know, Victor Fleming or people like that, they were contracted on, they were players, contracted players for studios, whether it was actors or directors or whatever. You know, they were journeyman people. And even when the rebels took over in the 70s, Easy Riders, Raging Bulls, you know, that happened. You had basically the singular visions of people. Movies are no longer necessarily the singular visions unless you're watching indie films, but indie films even are kind of, they're all kind of, even indie films have become sort of, I mean, again, you think back, I was talking about Spike Lee and Steven Soderbergh, and how the indie cinema boom of the late 80s, which gave way to the 90s, we got watching She's Gotta Have It, watching Sex, Lies, and Videotape, and watching Reservoir Dogs. I mean, there was some really explosive, really interesting stuff happening. And nowadays, it's really hard. It's really hard to see those voices because I think things have become, there's a homogenization that's occurred. But that doesn't mean that you're not going to discover things that you love as you delve into cinema history more and more. So, you know what? This is my new favorite thing. My new favorite thing is people writing in about Doc Vader and Mike F. talking about Filipino cinema. It's my new favorite thing. Here's another letter from Mike F. Hi again, Rob, and to the imagination connoisseurs, I hope I said that right now, you did, of the Post-Geek Singularity. First of all, thank you for reading my letter regarding Filipino superhero cinema. I think we all enjoyed that, especially when we saw the pictures. First of all, thank you for reading my letter regarding Filipino cinema, superhero cinema. In one of my previous letters that was sent to you that discussed Filipino horror cinema, they mentioned the movie Batman Fights Dracula, and I was like, wait a minute, the Cape Crusader himself fights Dracula? So as a result, I did some research. Turns out there really was a 1967 Filipino movie called Batman Fights Dracula, and it really was the Cape Crusader himself. But the thing is, it's not authorized by DC, and the film is considered lost now, so we won't get to see any footage of what it looks like. I did more research, and there were also other Filipino Batman movies. First is Alias Batman and Robin, in English, Alias Batman and Robin, which was released in 1965. There's also Fight Batman Fight, released in 1973, which features characters like Batman, Joker, Robin, and Catwoman. And there is Alias Batman and Robin, released in 1991, which is a musical comedy. And it has Batman, Robin, Joker, Penguin, Wonder Woman, and Catwoman. They made it to capitalize on the 1989 movie with Michael Keaton. There were legal issues when it was made, but they were able to sort it out since it did get released. The last one is the one that got me intrigued, which is James Batman. It was released in 1966, and it stars Philippine comedy legend Dolphy. The music is basically a spoof of Batman and James Bond. Here is the premise of the film that I found according to rarefilm.net. An evil syndicate is set to conquer the world, and the mission is to stop them from fulfilling their vicious plans. The consequences of their failure may mean the destruction of all dissenting countries who stand in their way. All countries must bow to their power before the deadline of 5 days expires. The solution is sending in the best operatives, James Haika and the dynamic duo of Batman and Robin. They are first detested with working with each other, but for the safety of the world, they join forces. Through thick and thin, they survive the syndicate's plan to dispose of them. They get closer to stopping the syndicate plan, but there is a traitor in their midst. Will this deter them from achieving their goal? I am really surprised about this information that I found. I thought I've known enough about Batman movies. Anyway, this is all in my letter for now. If you're curious, there are clips of Alias Bat. It's Alias? Is that Filipino? Alias? What is it? Tag along? Alias Batman and Robin and James Batman that you could find on YouTube. Thank you. Stay safe and live long and prosper. All right, man. Come on, Mike. I think we all know that this is going to be the new crusade. Our crusade. The Imagination Connoisseur Crusade. We need to see Filipino Batman movies. How can we get them? Somebody must have them. Who out there has crazy Filipino Batman movies? And we'll go find those links, man. Go find those links and watch them. That is some crazy-ass shit. I want to see these movies now, and I want to see that Wonder Woman-esque movie, too. And I can't believe Wonder Woman was actually in one of those films. I mean, no wonder. That is nutty. That is nutty. Wow. Now, this is a letter that was predated Jeffrey Mao's letter from yesterday. It was an earlier letter that I somehow got mixed up, but I'm going to read it. Greetings, Rob and the Post-Geek Singularity. Once again, it is I, the chairman, bringing insights into the glory of physical media and why we love them. You may be wondering why I said them. Have I gone all non-binary? No. You know what my favorite pronouns are? I, me, and mine. No, I'm kidding. Those aren't my favorite pronouns. Well, they kind of are, but no, this is because media is a plural word, just like data. However, we so rarely use the singular forms of those words that they become singular in everyday usage. But being that I am a grammar nut, I will try to adhere to the correct usage of the word. I was reminded of something about the physical aspect of motion pictures when I opened up the Alfred Hitchcock Classics Collection, a newly released set of the Master of Suspense's 4 great Universal films: Rear Window, Vertigo, Psycho, and The Birds, all presented with new 4K restorations and in 4K HDR Ultra Blu-ray. Being that I needed to finish watching The Boys first, I did not have time to watch any of the discs. I will certainly write a review of that collection, which I read yesterday. Although the question of whether to get it for any imagination connoisseurs is moot. The only question is, why haven't you bought it yet? I ask myself that every day. I will likely try to watch portions of the 4 films and write in something about them. However, what I wanted to write about today was something that I saw when flipping through the package. I noticed that for Rear Window, they used an older poster that was for an older restoration of the film, and it was done by Robert Harris and James Katz. Those names brought back memories, and I think it would behoove me to enlighten some of the members of the Post-Geek Singularity here who are not familiar with Messrs. Harris and Katz. Anyone who is a fan of the actual physical media of film, that is, all the physical accoutrement involved in its production, must also be a fan of film restoration. In this sense, physical media does not merely refer to the objects that contain copies of films for home viewing, but rather for all the tangible stuff that is used to get that image onto the frame of a film. I've always been fascinated by all that equipment, the lights, the cameras, the cranes, the dollies, the sets. But what happens after that frame is captured? Still more physical equipment. As we know, the process of making an actual physical film is an imperfect one. Every transfer between negative and positive introduces flaws. Dust, dirt, hairs, scratches, they all end up on film frames. When I was watching the Criterion Collection's The Great Escape, during one scene where Big X confronts Blythe about his blindness, hairs show up at the bottom of the screen for a few frames. Negatives sit around in a storeroom and deteriorate. Prints get used up so much they are essentially destroyed at the end of the theatrical run. So when studios want to take their classic films and re-release them theatrically or on home video, oftentimes special restoration teams are called in to perform the work. 2 of the earliest and most well-known of these experts were Robert Harris and James Katz. Fan of film restoration knew immediately that if these guys did the restoration, it would be top-notch. Their work has been honored with so many awards and accolades. Notable films that they restored include Lawrence of Arabia, Vertigo, Rear Window, Spartacus, The Godfather Part 2, and My Fair Lady. Of the films mentioned above, Lawrence of Arabia, Rear Window, Vertigo, and Spartacus have now been released on 4K. I hope that we will soon get other films on 4K as well. With the new technology of 4K transfer, and display now available to film restorers, it appears that we are getting a new renaissance of film restoration. We now have the ability to see these classic films as close to, if not better, than they were originally presented theatrically. But also, I hope that this also serves to highlight the earlier work of people like Harris and Katz, who are both artists and consummate technicians in understanding how to use the tools that they have at their disposal and bring out the filmmaker's true intent. For film restoration also requires a historian's touch. Amen, sir. Both Harris and Katz are just as much historians as they are preservationists, seeking to understand as much as possible what Hitchcock or David Lean or Stanley Kubrick intended with their shot selections, their lens choices, and their lighting setups. If you can work with the actual director or key crew, all the better, but there is no one alive anymore, then you have to do your homework. Well, there you go, Rob. Short letter today, but hopefully you can provide some additional insights into the world of film restorers and preservationists like Harris and Katz. It's more important now than ever that we don't lose the treasured works of our entertainment past. Thanks always, the chairman. Well, Jeffrey, another great letter. I'm sorry I didn't read that first and that I was out of order. But you are correct. I mean, look, our film legacy is constantly under the threat of disappearing forever. And that might seem strange, but even now, the best way to preserve film is still celluloid. And a lot of our films that are now, more than ever, are being finished entirely digitally. They're being captured digitally. There's no celluloid involved. There's no physicality of our films, even when they're finished digitally. They only exist as data. And look at how fast our own data storage systems have evolved over the last 20 years. What happens in 20 years or 30 years or 40 years? Are certain films going to be transferred? All films, I think, should have what are called color separation masters involved, where the color information is stored on, literally, believe it or not, black and white celluloid strips. So one movie would be separated out into 3 different separations, and they can be stored for 100 years. So you literally have a physical representation of the movie, even if it's been finished digitally. You scan it out and you create. I mean, these are the broad strokes, but you literally end up having 3 pieces of celluloid for a movie that you can later. It's stored on celluloid with the information, and you can later create it as digital files or put it back together. And not a lot of movies do that, especially indie films. Who's got the money? But that's what you should do. You know, you go and you make your 4K transfer. Like, look, we finished Tango Shalom in 4K, and I don't know if anyone would ever make a celluloid safety master of it, I guess you'd call it. But it could be. I mean, all films should be. And 4K. Look, we might make 8K and 12K, but the human eye can only see certain things. And I mean, data storage will have other reasons to go to higher levels, but having displays beyond 4K, we really can't see them necessarily. But that doesn't mean that you can't do it. And a lot of our movies, even our big effects heavy films, were not finished in 4K. They were finished in 2K. So when you're watching a 4K version of it, you're watching an up-res version. You might have the live action footage done at 4 or 6 or 8K or something, but your effects were probably finished at 2K. So, we'll see what happens. But the preservation of a film, and if you don't have notes from the cinematographer, and unless you have somebody who knows what they're doing, a lot of the time old films don't look as good as they should because the people working on them now, movies are finished. There's a fashion to it. People talk about that old teal and orange effect on films. Sometimes movies, look at the Star Wars films. I think the Star Wars films, when they finally went to Blu-ray, they didn't do such a great job color timing them. I don't know why, but unless you have somebody who really knows what they're doing, sometimes films don't look good. Film preservation is very, very important, and the more notes and the more you can go back to the original intent of the filmmakers, the better off you are. Man, it's so smoky. But I'm a big fan of that. But you're right, Jeffrey Mao. Film preservation, very, very important. Let's see where you all are at today. And I believe I've got everybody down. Yep. So I won't miss anybody. I will not miss anyone today. Where was I? Where do I start? Willow sends in a tip and says, when you finally get to watch Fast 9, what would you do if Han gets killed off again in the movie? Will you march onto the Universal lot with pitchforks and torches? # orbit for Han. Well, as everyone knows, one of my favorite character, let's face it, my favorite character in the Fast franchise is, of course, Han Solo, like the city. Han Solo, introduced, of course, in what I like to call the Drift, but Fast and Furious 3, the Tokyo Drift. I love that movie. I think that movie works as a standalone movie, even if you haven't seen any other movies in the franchise. I love the fish out of water story. I love the whole milieu of Japan. You know what? I love Japanese culture. I love Japanese girls. I love Japanese cars. I love Japanese die-cast. I love Japanese vinyl. I love Japanese packaging of any kind. I like Japanese movies and anime. There's nothing about Japan that I don't love. And I've never been there. But as far as my pop culture goes, that's why I love The Drift. I think it's great. And I know a lot of people are like, I don't like that movie. I don't know how anybody can not like that movie. I mean, I understand why, but you're wrong. And one of the things I really love about that movie is Sun Kang's character, Han. Han had it going on. And, of course, for those of you who don't remember, the character of Han did not even originate in the Fast and the Furious franchise. He's a character that was brought over from a movie called Better Luck Tomorrow that Justin Lin, the director, made with his friend Sun Kang. And he brought that character into the Fast franchise. I don't know how many characters are like that in the world, how many characters from other franchises or other indie films show up in a big studio movie. Something's crazy there, but I love that character. And I know they're bringing him back. And, I hope he's not a cyborg. I hope he's not a reincarnated, some Korean demon or something from some ancient jade vase or something like that. I'm just so happy he's coming back because, of course, I couldn't stand it when Jason Statham was revealed to have killed him, and I just think Han would have had an exit strategy, and clearly he did because they're bringing him back, and I've been at the forefront of the Justice for Han movement, And now when they're talking about the franchise going into space, I came up with on the John Campy show a new hashtag, Orbit for Han, because Han deserves to be in orbit. Monson Zayman sends in a super chat and says, Rob, you really should watch Etragruel on Netflix. It's really good. Watch the trailer. Let me know how you like it. Etragruel. I'll watch that. It's like Etragon. But Etragruel. You know what's funny about that? I actually, I have, well, I had it here. I had my demon number 1 here. I will watch that. Etragruel. I'll check that out. Anonymous said, yesterday you said you fear civility and the breakdown of society. I fear the breakdown of civility and the breakdown of society. That's what it is. One of my favorite films of 2014. Imagine Seeking a Friend for the End of the World with Steve Carell, only scarily realistic in tone. For me, this was an 8.5 out of 10. Yesterday you said, wait, and the break... Number 1 of my favorite films of 2014. Oh, Imagine Seeking a Friend. Okay. Scarily realistic, but I don't know the breakdown of society. But I don't know if you put the name in there. What's the name of the film? Tell him Jim sent in a tip and said, Edgar Wright is a director I will go to see. I will too, actually. I had no idea what Baby Driver was about when I went opening night, other than it was Edgar Wright. I was not disappointed. You know what? I am a huge fan of Edgar Wright. I love the Cornetto trilogy. I did not like Scott Pilgrim. Not a fan of Scott Pilgrim, but his other movies I really like. He's a lot of fun. And I love the show Spaced. Cutie Patootie is here and sends in a tip and says, disappointed that your friend Heels versus Babyface jumping on the Cuties hate bandwagon. He admits he hasn't even seen it. Can you fix his head? I get recommended his videos now because of your collaboration. Well, I think I have to say that Az has done some really interesting videos, I thought. Did you ever watch Abba and Preach? They're 2 guys out of Canada, 2 black dudes out of Canada. I watched them a lot. I really like their videos. They did a video on the Cuties controversy that I thought was pretty level-headed. And I think it's really interesting that that the movie is certainly not pro-sexualization of these kids, and that it's actually the exact opposite. I haven't seen the movie either, but I did do a piece on it, and I think that the controversy over the film is the way it's been sold here in America is abhorrent, and that should never have happened. But I think, you have a woman of color from Senegal who made a movie about her experience and her family, and as Preach pointed out on their channel, that you go to dance competitions. I mean, I took jazz dancing when I was younger, and girls wore what they wore, and I didn't mind it. But yeah, it's a strange thing the way we yeah. But it's interesting. I mean, a lot of people have jumped on this bandwagon. I think people need to see the film. I really do. I think the film, from what I understand about it, I want to watch the film. That Abba Preach, I think they hit the nail on the head. So I am not here to necessarily tell people that they're wrong. I can only voice my own opinion and hope that they might take something from that. I don't like this idea. I get there's a lot of people, interestingly enough, a lot of mostly modern Star Trek fans that say really mean and nasty shit to me on Twitter. And I try and not, sometimes I take the bait. I'm not proud of that, but sometimes I do. But for the most part, there's people that say really mean and nasty things and about people that I know and have worked with. And it's interesting that that's their response to me criticizing modern Star Trek. It's strange. It's a strange, I don't, and then they'll call me a gatekeeper, which I've never understood the gatekeeper term, fandom having gatekeepers. No one is causing you or stopping you from watching and liking anything that you want. If I say that I don't like modern Star Trek, and here's why, I am not gatekeeping. I'm not telling you what you should and shouldn't watch. I am not telling you what you should and shouldn't like. You should like whatever the hell you want. And you can. And me saying something or me talking about my opinion is not gatekeeping. And yet that happens a lot. I get accused of that a lot. I'm like, how am I preventing? Unless there's a gate that's locking you out of whatever it is that you want to see. Watch what you want to watch. And if somebody has a dissenting point of view and they're on Twitter, Well, I don't know why you're being triggered by someone else's point of view. So what? What do you care? Somebody you don't know is on Twitter or on the internet somewhere telling you that something that you're watching that you like sucks. Well, if you like it, you know that that's not true for you. I mean, if you want to look at it that way. So why bother? Why get mad at somebody who tells you that or says that Star Trek Discovery or Picard are terrible? I think they're terrible. I think they're a huge waste of money. I think they're badly produced. I think they put the time and effort into the wrong place. And now we actually, if you've watched that trailer for the new third season of Discovery, they even talk about that dysfunction is the name of our game or whatever. You're never going to convince me that that's what Star Trek is about. Julius Goodwin sends in a tip. Hey, Julius, how are you doing? By the way, that new wine, the second batch of wine from the wine club, oh my God, it was so good. And Elizabeth confiscated the other bottle. And it's fair because I confiscated one of the first ones and said, I'm taking this, you can't drink it. And I went, okay. So thanks for that. Julius says, I came in on the tail end of your speech, so I have to ask, did you say we should all flash more people in life? I'm all for that. No. I said you should flash dance your life. Flash dance your life. And what I mean by that is the ad line for flash dance, and also it's in the song, take your passion and make it happen. I think that's good advice. And I like to take things and turn them into phrases. So flash dance your life. There's an original Rob Burnett phrase derived from Flashdance, a movie that Elizabeth has never seen. We're going to have to watch that. For one, you know what? We're going to watch Flashdance. We're going to watch Hunt for Red October on Monday, and then we're watching The Verdict on Wednesday. But I think we're going to watch Flashdance too at some point in the next 2 weeks, unwinding about movies because she's never seen it. So that's what I mean, Julius. Flashdance your life. Take your passion and make it happen. Jason Whitcomb sends in a tip and said, Rob, wouldn't you say that Dark Star, though being a college project and more or less a comedy, was the springboard for Alien? In fact, I think the Alien sequels are all missing the Dan O'Bannon element. Your thoughts? I think that's an interesting idea. You know, well, of course, they made Dark Star as a feature, as a student film that was like 45 minutes, and then was it Jack H. Harris put money into it, and it was expanded into a feature. And yeah, I think there's a lot of the Alien in there. There's certainly the scene with the beach ball is definitely a precursor to Alien. I think absolutely, and of course, Dan O'Bannon, who worked on that, and Dead and Buried, and of course, Return of the Living Dead, and Life Force. Rest in peace, sir. Definitely, absolutely. Jason goes on to say, also rumor has it that RoboCop is being rebooted by the original writers of the series, and it's a prequel, and RoboCop will not appear in the series. Rob, I'm so tired of these old franchises. Are there no original ideas left in Hollywood? Thoughts? What Jason is talking about is, yes, they are. I think it's Ed Neumeyer. Is it Ed Neumeyer? Who they're talking about doing a Dick Jones RoboCop prequel series. And, OCP, Omni Consumer Products, I think it's very odd. Somebody said, is this like Gotham, but in the RoboCop universe? Look. I think the idea of making a show like The Wire or The West Wing or something, but really it's about how an American city descends into a dystopia and how it's going to be cleaned up, but you're watching how old Detroit descended in the movie at least, or Seattle. I mean, look, if somebody came and pitched me the idea for that, I'm like, it's a RoboCop prequel series and it's set in Seattle. And imagine if they set up the Chaz and then they continued on. The Chaz was allowed to continue and flourish. And it turned into a lawless, because that's what it was turning into, because people are let's face it, a lot of the people that are protesting and setting up these whatever, they're utopian civilizations that they want, they're going to devolve very quickly. And we saw it happen in Seattle. But what would be interesting is that's a show. I would pitch that show. Chaz was allowed to continue. The Capitol Hill, free zone, whatever the hell they called it, Chud, the Chad. There's a series. Like, what if a group of people, like the Portland protesters or the Seattle protesters, absolutely took over a section of the city, and what would happen there? And they did create their own country within a country within a city. I mean, that would be really interesting. You could show the rise and fall. It'd be like ancient Rome, but compressed into like a year or something like that. I would watch that if that was what the RoboCop series is about. But it seems a little It's a RoboCop series, but RoboCop hasn't been invented yet, so there is no RoboCop. It's weird. Senor Ashish says, I find it funny that so many who have not seen the film Cuties are dogpiling on the film on social media, the very thing the film critiques as the reason why so many young girls today have self-esteem issues and are forced into adulthood much too soon. Yes, Senor Ashish, that is exactly right. You are exactly correct. And, yeah, I completely agree with you 100%. 100%. Jason Whitcomb sends in a tip and says, Omar, it's easy to wax romantic about the movies of the past, but mind you, there were lots of crap-happy films that I saw in the theater in the 70s and 80s. Starship Invasions, Laser Blast, the boring Firefox. Come on, man, think Russian. Firefox was rad. It wasn't all great films, just to let you know. Cardinal Sin, Rob, you've got mail. R.E. my reply to your square up. Yes, I owe you a square up. I do that. I will. I swear. Ricky B sent in a super chat and says, Filipino Batman, Robin, Wonder Woman, and Dancing Dwarf Spider-Man musical number. Wow. I'm in. Count me in, Ricky. Anonymous sends in a tip and says, I love your show, sir. One of my favorite sci-fi films of all time is the OG Planet of the Apes. Whoa, my God. Look, that movie, I'll tell you the story again, since you bring it up, Anonymous. I'll tell this. I've told the story before on the show, but why not tell it again? Because I love telling the story. So, I had to have been 6 or 7, probably. I think 5, 6, but I had to be 6 or 7 because I was already totally enamored of sci-fi. War of the Worlds I'd seen. I'd already loved Star Trek. I'd watch anything with space. I was watching sci-fi theater on Sundays. And I'll never forget, my bedtime was like 9 o'clock. And I start watching. I'm watching TV downstairs. We had the split-level house, so the 2 stories of our house, there was the garage here, and then the second story where the den, my parents' bedroom, my sister's, and my bedroom was, and then we had kind of the split part of the house here. So the TV room was down here, and there was you had to go up the stairs to the split part of the house, and then up the stairs again to the second part of our house. So I'm downstairs, and that was the big TV room where the big TV was, where I spent most of my time. I'd build models down there because I'd spread out newspaper on the floor and build my plastic models and watch TV. And so Planet of the Apes comes on. And for those of you who know your movie, you've got Charlton Heston doing a ship's log. He's dressed in his white astronaut suit, and he's recording, and all of the other people that are in his ship are in suspended animation. He's like, I leave the 20th century behind with no regrets. Does man still make war against his brother? And this whole speech. And I'm watching it, and I'm like, oh my God, it's an astronaut in a spaceship giving a ship's log. And I got that. And then he finishes giving a ship's log, and then he goes and he gets in suspended animation, and the thing comes down, and you hear this boom, 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 and it's Jerry Goldsmith's do-do-do, do-do-do-do-do. It's the Planet of the Apes theme playing over the credits. And I thought it was the end of the movie because the credits were kind of long. I didn't know. I didn't understand the difference between opening and closing credits. So I thought the movie was over. I'm like, oh. And I'm like, Planet of the Apes? I didn't know what that meant. Even then, I thought maybe it's a metaphor. Like, I didn't know what it meant. So I just watched all the credits because lights were going through. I knew there was no post-credit sequence. But in this case, there was, because the movie wasn't over. And the ship, the Icarus, crashes into Lake Powell. And they find Stuart. They're awakened as the ship is flooding. They find Stuart, the woman who's her suspended animation chambers malfunction. She's like this weird skeletal, horrible life force. If she was in life force, she'd suck someone's life force out and come back to life. She looked bad. And the other astronauts are getting out of the Icarus as it's sinking. Well, once I realized that the movie was not over, I ran upstairs to my mom. And it was already past my bedtime. We're talking like 9:10 by now. And I begged her. And when I got into this mode, my parents, they had to capitulate because they couldn't. They knew I wouldn't stop. I'm like, oh my God, this is a spaceship. They're in it's called. And my mom just, all she could hear was spaceship, astronaut, whatever the hell I was saying. She knew what I was like when it was science fiction, fantasy, or horror, or whatever it was. I couldn't help myself. It was like I was on imagination crack. My mom was like, "What's the movie called?" And I said, "It's called Planet of the Apes." And I had no idea what that meant. And my mom looks at me and she goes, "It's Planet of the Apes." And she was reluctant because it was, and I think it was even a Friday night. It wasn't like it was a school night, like it was a Friday night. And so she's like, "Okay, you can watch it," hoping I'd probably, but she knew that when I watched TV, I was like locked in. You know, I was like Jesse Eisenberg's Mark Zuckerberg when his friend, what's his face comes back to Andrew Garfield comes back to smash his computer. I was locked in. I could not be bothered. So I'm watching Planet of the Apes, you know, and they're trudging through the Forbidden Zone, and they see the crazy lightning, and it was cool. I'm like, oh yeah, this is cool. Like, what are they going to do? I mean, nothing exciting really had happened. And then, of course, they get closer and closer to foliage, and you see the weird scarecrows. You don't know what they are yet. And then they find water, and they take off their clothes, and they jump in the water. And then their clothes get stolen. And then anyway, they find the mute humans in the glade eating food and all that. And the astronauts are, oh my God, you know, what's going on? They found people. And I'm like, okay. Then was the moment where my life changed. Now, it changed probably when I watched the Twilight Zone episode To Serve Man. That was the first Twilight Zone episode I saw. I didn't know that Rod Serling had been involved with the Planet of the Apes movie. I didn't know that. But the thing that changed my life was the first moment you see an ape in the first Planet of the Apes, and rides out armored up, the leather armor, the bandolier, the gun, rides up, and then Jerry Goldsmith's score, you hear it go, wah, 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 and there's this snap zoom just into the ape on horseback. I lost my shit. I was like I'm like, oh my God, you know, I can't even tell you what it was like. I was this was like again, it was like seeing The Matrix, but I was 7 or 6, and I couldn't. I'm like, this was beyond. I had never even imagined this yet. You know, I hadn't seen the anime. It was pre-animated Planet of the Apes animated series, which I think is 74. Because then suddenly, once Planet of the Apes was there, it was like in my life. Migos started making Planet of the Apes toys. There was a Planet of the Apes animated series. There was a Planet of the Apes live action series. I mean, it was, but I hadn't seen it yet. This was the first time. And seeing that snap zoom and hearing the Goldsmith's crazy score announcing this, there was some dope shit. Like, I'd never seen. I'm like, oh my God, losing my mind. So the question you were asking me, what was it about Planet of the Apes? Okay, you had 2 parts to this question. I mean, I lost my shit watching this movie. I did, and it was again one of those things where as an imagination connoisseur, as a newly minted or currently being minted imagination connoisseur, seeing something like this movie, and then of course, I was so in. Planet of the Apes is kind of a talky film. You know, it's not like it's full of action for a kid. But again, I would watch anything, and I was taking it all in. I was soaking it all in. I definitely got, you know, when Taylor gets shot in the neck and he can't speak. And, you know, I don't even think they bleeped it on TV. Get your stinking paws off of me, you damn dirty ape. And there's that music, bah, you know, and all the apes, because he talked. It's just, I'm thinking about it now. I'm getting chills. I'm flashing back. I've seen Planet of the Apes 100 times. But having this memory of seeing it for the first time, I mean, I'm getting this flashback. It's like when I used to get stoned in college. Every time I get stoned, really stoned, I always thought about the very first $6 Million Man episode I saw. It was always the same one, where they used footage from the Andromeda strain, and where Steve, it's like the SWAT van that's broadcasting the signal, and Steve Austin pulls out the tin can with with cement in it and throws it at the truck every single time. But when I talk about the first time I saw Planet of the Apes, man, boy, and it was one of those things nobody tells you. You know, as a kid, I was so obsessed with Star Trek and Outer Limits and Twilight Zone, but you don't know. Like, I don't know Planet of the Apes exists. Now there's the internet. You're like, what are the greatest science fiction movies? If I was like 7 years old, I'd be like, what are the best science fiction movies ever made? I'd get a list and I would know. But back then, I didn't know. So, like, when you're seeing something like this, it's like a bolt from heaven. would just hit you smack dab in the imagination, and it blew your mind. And being a kid in the 70s was like that. It was like that. And then new movies started coming out that were equally mind-blowing. So it was like, you're being a kid, you're on this consciousness expanding trip. And now all this stuff like exists. I mean, when I was a kid, this is probably only 4 years after Planet of the Apes had originally been released. I would imagine. And it was, that kind of stuff happened all the time. And it's hard to, I don't know what it's like to be a kid now, because you find all this stuff out, it exists. Anyway, you ask, your question is, how many more Apes films do you think Disney could dish out, especially after the success of the new trilogy? Again, if they're going to make more Planet of the Apes movies, I hope that they're planned out. I mean, I think one of the most surprising movies that I love the Apes franchise. I loved all 5 Planet of the Apes movies when I was growing up, even Battle for the Planet of the Apes. And I like Battle for the Planet of the Apes because I had the Power Records Planet of the Apes. I only had Battle. And it was great because the Lawgiver and McDonald and all the characters. And I love Battle for the Planet of the Apes. So when I'd see the movie as a kid, I'm like, oh, I'd listen to the Power Record 100 times. And, I love seeing it, even though if you watch all 5, it's clearly, they made it for like 6 cents, but it's still fun to see. But I think, look, as long as they plan them, I would very much like to see, I think, though, that now where they leave after War of the Planet of the Apes, I don't really know, I think now you've got, and the next movie, and 2,000 years passed, or something. I don't know if we need one. You got the 5 great Planet of the Apes movies. You got the Planet of the Apes trilogy, the modern trilogy, is really freaking good. I mean, maybe War of the Planet of the Apes isn't exactly everything you want, but I think as a whole, I couldn't believe how good Rise of the Planet of the Apes was. I hated Tim Burton's remake. I was so bummed out by that movie. But I did love the new ones. But yeah, I mean, because they were terrific. But I just don't, do we have to see any more? There's so many new things. Make some more John Carter movies. But, I mean, they could make more. I just don't see how they are going to do it. But you know what? Great story, great characters, if they figured out a way to do it. I just think that whole milieu is kind of played out. I just do. And I would say it's amazing. The Planet of the Apes franchise, you have the 5 original films, you got the Tim Burton remake, and then you have those 3 other films. I'm like, move on. Why can't those be allowed to exist, those 9 movies, or their Planet of the Apes continuum? And then you got the compilation movies of the TV show. So, yeah. Calvin Bowes is here, and he says, me and some friends were wondering, what was the first ever shared cinematic universe? I think it's the Universal Monsters. Am I right? Ooh, that's probably good. Unless there were serials before that, like, Dr. Mabuse, wouldn't that? Well, those would just be sequels. But shared universe, I think you might be right. I mean, I think that's a good place to go. Maybe I'd have to look into that. Leclodius is here. Never gonna give you up, never gonna let you down, never gonna run around and desert you. Why? Never gonna make you cry, never gonna say goodbye, never gonna tell a lie and hurt you. Yes, Rob, happy 511th episode. You've been rickrolled. Woo! Wow, I've never been rickrolled in a tip before, but thank you for rickrolling me. Anthony Gonzalez sends in a tip and says, with Kevin Feige now having pretty much every Marvel character available to him, do you think he's even possibly considered a Power Pack film? It could be absurd, but in the right hands, it could be awesome. Do you think they've even considered it? I have to tell you, I loved Power Pack. I just pulled my number 1 to get slabbed. I love Power Pack. I think they should. I think Power Pack should be a Disney Plus series. And, it'd be a great kids series. I loved Power Pack even when I was in my teens. It's got to be done well. I think I think they're going to I think they could do a really good job. I really do think that. Alexander Wilson says, when I first saw Free Enterprise, I said, damn, does this person who made this hate the next generation? I didn't know you made this until the day they said it on AMC Heroes when the character went on a TNG rant. What was the rationale behind that? I love free enterprise. Well, Alexander Wilson, thank you. You know, and it was just a joke. I mean, we love the original series so much. The reason I was working on the Star Trek experience in Vegas, and one of the very early impulses to make free enterprise, I want to say this was in 96 or 97, I was cutting all of the video material that was going to play, well, that did play in the Star Trek experience in Vegas. And that was, I was actually paid. I was a paid Star Trek consultant for Viacom back in the 90s, Viacom licensing. And then as a result of that, I moved over. I was hired by Landmark Entertainment to work on the Star Trek experience, which is a great job for a year and a half. And so I had edited this 5-minute compilation video it was a Star Trek montage. It had like every time Dr. McCoy said, "I'm a doctor, not a, moon shuttle conductor," or whatever. It had every woman Kirk kissed. It had every alien planet. It had every alien. It had every starship, all cut together in this montage, and that was going to represent the original series. And it was like 5 minutes. And so I get this back. So all of our videos had to go through Rick Berman's office. They had to be approved. And after I worked on this, I mean, this was my crowning achievement in life. My love letter to the original series was going to be this video that was going to play in the Star Trek experience for everybody who went there. And we get a note back from Rick Berman's office, and the note was, there's too much original series here. Cut it down. There was no understanding. I'll tell you something else that happened, which is sort of unrelated. But I also, in my Klingon video, the Klingon historical video that I had done, there's a rapid succession of Klingon battle cruisers firing their weapons, their primary weapons or whatever. There was only ever one shot in the original series, in the original Star Trek series, where a Klingon D7 battlecruiser fires its disruptors. Not in the new remastered version, but in the original series. It was in Elaine of Troyes. And that's the only time you ever see a Klingon battlecruiser fire its disruptors. That's it. One shot. So it was a quick montage of every Klingon battlecruiser firing up to that point, up to 96. Yeah, it was because I didn't have First Contact yet. Or maybe I did have First Contact. I don't know. And the note that came back from Rick Berman's office is they wanted us to cut the shot of the original Klingon battlecruiser. And I was so incensed because they didn't like the effects work. And I'm like, come on, man, that's the only shot. That's the only shot. You can't cut that out. It's the only shot. So I would constantly get these notes. And so I would bitch and moan to Mark Altman about how, and we were mad at Rick Berman for whenever he was not making the canonical Star Trek. It's not like Alex Kurtzman was the first time I've been mad at a Star Trek creator. So we were mad. I was mad at Rick Berman's. He constantly, whenever he could, would denigrate the original series. I'm like, why do we have to put up with this? And I would get those notes. So I would tell Mark my frustration, and Free Enterprise was actually born out of that. So that's where the line, I fucking hate the Next Generation. That's where that came from. I didn't really hate the Next Generation. I just hated the fact that I was being interfered with in that way. Bonjour, Rob. This is Master Sifo Claudius is here. I will offer some more recent cinematic moments that have blown my mind. Arrival, The Time Revelation, Inception, Fight Club, Tyler Was Always There, Dark Knight, The Truck Flip, Inception, The Kick, and Endgame and Infinity War, every scene. Yeah, I mean, I agree with you, but I think that, what you're describing, I think that as a lifelong imagination connoisseur, I would say this is second wave stuff that you can appreciate because you've already lived through all this other stuff. And I agree with you. I think I would give you all of those movies. I think the problem is there's been similar films. Like I saw Inception 8 times in the theater because I loved it so much. Fight Club was amazing. And I have to tell you, when I first saw it, the Fight Club Revelation, I love that. I thought it was great. I loved Fight Club when I saw it, and I think you're right. Also a movie from 1999. The Dark Knight, that truck flip was amazing. But I like all of The Dark Knight. Inception, The Kick, absolutely. Endgame, Infinity War, I'm with you 100%. 100%. Michael Preston sends in a super chat. He says, I just watched Prince of Persia. It was pretty good and surprisingly liked John Carter. Both movies I feel were underrated. Prince of Persia is not bad. It's not bad. And John Carter, we did on Whining About Movies. I'm a huge John Carter fan, and I'm bummed out that it wound up where it wound up. So what can you do? Well, ladies and gentlemen, boys and girls, this has been a rollicking good time for me. So I'm going to bring an end to Robservations episode number 511. I want to thank my moderating staff. Haynock is here. Joshua Levesque is here. The Richard is here. Mike Bodden is here. Hello, Mike Bodden. Robert Priso is here. We got everybody. That's amazing. Well, I want to thank you all for being here. I'm going to go back to building this other shelf and making Elizabeth happy by moving all of the last vestiges of anything I own out of the house and into here, the Robservatory. And so there you go. And this has been a great show. I want to thank everybody for supporting the channel via tips and super chats. Thank you very much. I want to thank everybody for sending me letters. I got more letters to read, obviously. You can send me letters at theburnetwork.net. There's a place in the top right-hand corner where you can submit letters and videos. Also, you can always leave comments on the channel. I do read comments on the videos. And if you want, find me on Twitter at BurnettRM. Find me on Instagram at Robert Meyer Burnett. Or obviously find me here, which you already have. So good for you. Hit subscribe, hit like. And I will be back tomorrow on the 13th of September. Do you know what tomorrow is? Tomorrow is a big day, imagination connoisseurs. Yes, it is. Tomorrow, you might not remember this. People talk about 9/11, but do you know what happened 21 years ago? On September 13th, 1999? You all remember? It was a big day, man. Changed the world forever. The moon, of course, was blown out of Earth's orbit by the explosion of the nuclear storage dumps. Yeah, I guess they're nuclear storage dumps that are on the back of the dark side of the moon. They blew up. And they as you remember, the moon was blown out of Earth's orbit and has never been seen since. That's right. Tomorrow is a big anniversary. Moon Day, September 13th, 1999. I have a t-shirt that commemorates the event. I'm sure all of you do too. All of you know how difficult it was to live through those years. What happened to the tides, what happened to a lot of the earth, all those earthquakes. I mean, we lost whole cities, just fell into the earth, gobbled up. So tomorrow is a big day, imagination connoisseurs. September 13th, 1999. We are going to celebrate the 21st anniversary of the day we lost our moon to the nuclear conflagration on the dark side. It was a terrible, terrible day with much loss of life, and we will remember it tomorrow. So I hope you're here with me, probably at 2 o'clock, maybe at 1, but probably at 2, and we will celebrate, or not celebrate, we will remember those brave souls from Moonbase Alpha who somewhere I don't know, are they somewhere now amongst the stars? Do they run into the Battlestar Galactica? I mean, who knows? There might be even now, brothers of man who even fight to survive. Come on, you don't know. They could have met. So tomorrow, we celebrate the loss of our moon and our strength and resolve for keeping our civilization together after such an enormous tragedy. Well, thank you very much, ladies and gentlemen. Remember, every person you meet has a story to tell that you have yet to hear. And all you have to do is listen. And with that, I say to everyone, have a better day. And I promise you will.